So, Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Mohammad Abdi, or some of you folks might know me as Taha. So, go by both my middle and my first name. I'll be today presenting about software engineering, just kind of giving you an overview of software engineering. I'll have some myself and Zahid. Zahid, you want to quickly introduce yourself also?
Yes, Salam. My name is Zahid, and I've been in software development for last 22 years. So here's the summary. Basically, I did my computer engineering in India, and then master's over here in New York. And then since then, I've been working at a few startups, and then a bunch of other well-known companies here in the Silicon Valley, like Salesforce, Apple, etc. So, basically, I have had the opportunity to work with a lot of senior and junior people, and enjoyed the ride so far. Yeah.
All right. Hey, welcome, Zahid. So quick background about myself. Came and did my BS in electrical engineering from Austin. Again, much like Zahid, worked for some big companies, some companies you guys might not even know names of, like Sybase, but Oracle, Yahoo, and then I've been working at a few startups. Currently, I lead engineering at a small fintech startup. And happy always, welcome to connect offline, answer any of your questions, anything that you can do. Have had a long career in software in various roles, so happy to connect and later on and kind of help answer questions. All right, let's please feel make it interactive. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask us questions. All right, so quick recap of education that's required for a successful career in software engineering. And this by no means, we are hosting this from the Silicon Valley, so this by no means is like a blueprint, right? We all know, hopefully all of us have heard success stories of, which do not follow this beaten path, right? But a BS or a MS in computer science or a related field really helps. It provides a good foundation, right? Good educational foundation in terms of theories and things like that to kind of help you at your job and kind of succeed at your job. Again, in name brand school helps. A lot of the big companies or a lot of the companies as they hire, whether consciously or subconsciously, there is a bias of having a name brand school, right? So you kind of, when you come from a name brand, with a name brand from having done a BS or a MS or even higher education, you will see that there's a bias for that. Now, as software, there are some subfields in software, and we'll touch a little bit more, that would probably require more education, and we'll kind of go towards that. One of the big things that's there in software, right, is that this is not necessarily the only path that you kind of, to have a successful career in software. There's a lot of open source projects that are out there in various domains. So basically, if you like health, you probably contribute in health. You like some analytics, you can do that, right? Or in other domains. And pretty much any topic that you pick on, and any area that you can think of, there's an open source project there. And being an active member of open source projects is really, kind of gives you the knowledge of a real world working knowledge. A lot of these open source projects are run really well. And what they do is they give you the experience and knowledge of being in the software industry, right? What are the best practices? A lot of these things is just not about knowing how to write code, but other skills around it, right? Like how to test it, how to think about it, how to design it, how to document it, right? A lot of the people I work with a lot of engineers at my company and beyond. Documenting what they have done is like one of the big things, because that helps us maintain code in the longer run and is beneficial for the company, right? So a lot of these skills you're going to pick up if you contribute in open source projects. And everybody at this point in time, like a lot of people hiring managers, they realize that. So everybody looks like, I personally look out, like if somebody has contributed as an active contributor on an open source project, I definitely look out and weigh that against anything that we have interviewed them for, right? Because if if they've done good open source projects, that means they know their stuff. Of course, finally, last, right, there's, again, just like open source projects in pretty much every domain, there are online courses in almost all these, on all the domains, right? Most of them are free or nominal fees. You can take those to build up knowledge in a specific domain if you don't know that, right? So there are different pathways to success for a successful career in software engineering, but I would again say, right, at this stage in your career, a DS or MS would really kind of be very helpful. Zahid, any take that you want, or if anybody has any questions?
Yeah, I just want to add that, somebody who might be new on the call might say, what is software engineering or what is, computer science? So essentially think about it like it's something that's like, um, how we have a body and soul. Software is the soul of your every device, right? Whether it be a phone or your gaming system or anything else. Even cars these days. So software kind of runs, you cannot see it, but it kind of runs in everything. And in the digital age that we are living in right now, even if you don't want to pursue computer science and software engineering, you will, in any field that you take, encounter software in some ways. So it doesn't hurt to give it a try. Like if you haven't taken any coding class, I encourage you to take a summer or any other coding class to at least get a feel of computer coding and all that. I remember I did not like software engineering during my first year, but then I loved it after, right? So it's kind of a combination of as Mohammad put it. Basically, it's not just you have to be able to do multiple things. Basically, it's a combination of science and art. That's how, or a craft. That's how I would put it. Yeah.
If you have questions, please feel free to raise your hands. We can kind of unmute you and let you ask your questions. All right. Thanks. I definitely good insight, right? I think yes. I think one of the big things that
I think. Sorry, Zamin, did you have a question, Zamin? Okay, sorry, Taha. I thought he had a question. He didn't unmute. Sorry.
Sure. All right. Yeah. So one of the things that I was kind of just touching on what Zahid touched on was pretty much every domain that you look in, right? Every career that you look in now has some aspect of software, right? So it's always a good idea to kind of have a little bit of a know-how on how software works, right? How systems work. So like a programming course at this point, like for high school kids, I definitely recommend it because that kind of gives you a good foundation, at least an understanding of how things are going to be working. All right, let's move to the next one. I think some of these things we touched on the previous slide, but I think this will be true for a lot of careers. And as we go forward, definitely, I look back at my career spanning over 20 years. I see a lot of new technologies that I have had to learn. Right? I expect that to kind of continue, that trend to continue, right? An ability to learn new technologies, adapt is really important for a career in software, right? Again, generally, as a software engineer, you'll be asked to work on multiple things. These are like common life skills, right? Like taking or organizing, prioritizing your work, making sure things are getting done in time, communicating, what are not just like what you have done, but what issues you're raising. I think communication at work, in your professional career is really important. Being able to analyze, right? what you have, like the data, lot of the work now being done by software engineers or data engineers in subspecialties, like a lot of analytical work that we do. But I think like my favorite one, like my last three are my, like last two are my favorite one, right? Troubleshooting and debugging. Like to me, that's like it kind of falls in terms of analytical skill, but like that really kind of defines, right? Like you will, or other people around you or the systems that you're working on will have trouble, right? Will have issues. They will not work as expected. An ability to kind of go in, take a look at that, some of the stuff that you might have worked out, some of the others might not, that that is really key to being a good software engineer. At least that's my personal feeling, right? And while introverts do tend to do well in this, because there is, you can kind of work on your own piece and you don't have to interact as much. But teamwork and collaboration always kind of works out, right? Like, because you can get your knowledge from others, you can get others' perspective. Sometimes you get stuck on things. You or your colleague might get stuck on things, and just having a different set of eyes is always very helpful. So teamwork and collaboration is really important in these. And there are several people on this call where we have worked together on some software. Just like having an extra pair of eyes for me has been really helpful, because they've just been able to quickly tell that, hey, this is what you're doing wrong, while I've been looking at that same issue for like in some cases for days, right, and not able to. Zahid.
No, I think this is good. Yeah, we can.
Any questions from? Zahid, you want to kind of maybe cover this, and then you'll kind of switch the order.
Sure. Yeah, basically interest and skills. So in every field you have to learn new basically stuff that is coming out, right? And keep yourself abreast of what's happening, and that applies to software too. There are new technologies that are coming, so you'll need to see if you can apply those to the business problems that you're going to solve. And basically that's where the fun is, right? Like you're not just stuck with one thing. You can always change, and you can basically even move within companies in different groups, right? Like let's say you have learned a certain programming language, and you have been like coding for the last 5 years or more, and now you want to basically take that knowledge and move into something more that is to do with systems, or and you can basically do that. So it's a evolving and changing field, and also allows you to develop your interest over time. I don't know if I covered everything in the slide, but
sure.
You can add.
Sure. Let me touch a little bit on this, right? I think this is something, again, right, Zahid kind of touched on, right? Pretty much every domain that you look in has software kind of operating somewhere in the behind, right? So software is applied in different scenarios, right? In different domains and different. So you need to understand the business to be successful. One of the things that you probably want to kind of end your career is understand is like, what are you using the software to solve? Like, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? How are the users going to use it? Things like that, right? So knowing that, right, knowing the business or knowing the domain, right, really gives you an edge over others, and the ability to deliver quality software, right, at the end of the day. So that's kind of becomes the key. So it's just not about like learning this, like being good at coding or good programming, things like that, but also understanding the ecosystem that you're working on. What are you trying to do, right? With what is this software going to do? That's always very key in my experience in my career, that it has been very useful. We touched a little bit on this, right? In terms of technologies is evolving really quickly. So you guys are right now in high school. By the time you come out of high, like go if you choose to go to college and bachelor's or master's, a lot of the technologies, the stacks might look different. Like if I go back and take a look at my career, I don't know how many of you have heard about Java programming, right? So Java was a language that was coming out very new when I got out of college, right? Now, it's one of those older things, a lot of new technologies have kind of come in, cloud computing, IoT. So, we'll touch a little bit about all this. But technology, as we find new domains to apply software, both the technologies and the tools change and you need to adapt with it. But one thing that kind of remains very, very, true, like at the base level, right? Thinking about how do you solve the problem, design, patterns, architecture, right? Which is like basically how do you lay out code, right? The easiest thing I can probably lay out, compare this to, I used to always say, think of it as writing a good essay, right? It has to have structure, right? You have to have a structure that you all have learned in writing, any kind of on topic, like your essays have to have a structure. But somebody was kind of, I was talking to someone and they pointed out, it's almost like also writing like poetry, right? So you want to kind of have those things also. So there's a certain art to also these. So you need to kind of think about and kind of learn some of these things that are crucial to being a good software engineer or programmer. All right, let's go to next. Right. So let's touch a little bit of the earning potential, right? So the new college, and kind of kept it to college grads, assuming that you are looking to kind of go into college, go to college and then kind of start your career after college, either BS or MS. It's like we touched on earlier, right? There are certainly other pathways, but they're a little bit more trickier and more difficult, right? Pay scale differs, right? So like we touched on, software is kind of being multiple different industries pretty much you're going to run into. Are working. I have people working on their departments in software, right? So pay scale is going to differ by region, geography, region, segment that you're working on, but kind of maybe a little bit focusing on the Bay Area, right? New college grads can expect to start between somewhere 72K to 140K a year. Don't take that as gospel, right? Like if you do a little bit of research, depends upon your negotiating skills and things like that. And also, again, what company you're working for, right? Like there is a variety of companies that you're working on. But this is like the starting, and then the earning potential for a good software engineer is quite high. It can easily touch over overall complete package. You hear about this, if you do a little bit of research on the internet, you will hear about like the area companies paying well north of $500,000 for a good software engineer, as you kind of talk about it. All right. Zahid, anything you want to add to this?
Not much, no.
Okay. All right. Any questions? All right. We are work-life balance. Let's talk a little bit about the work-life balance. First of all, what does that mean, right? Like, you might have seen, people around you, or definitely, or heard stories about in terms of, how much work kind of gets brought in home, right? And how much of the work kind of intrudes in your home life. Obviously, it might have even become clearer, right, during the COVID times, where a lot of people are working from home. Very true for a lot of people in software industry, right? Because you can connect and kind of work over the internet. Lot of work can be done over there. So there has been a shift, right? Work-life balance, from that aspect, where you're getting calls all over all the time from during, let's say, it's just not a 9-to-5 job, right? So in the Bay Area, and especially in earlier stage in your career, you need end up putting in a lot of hours. There is a lot, if you, especially in smaller companies, there's a little bit less of a work-life balance. For in the bigger companies, you can have set hours and kind of work through that. And it also depends, again, right? It depends upon the culture of the company, and also like I think what priorities you set as you go forward. Zahid, anything else? I know you worked in a bunch of these companies that are kind of listed here. Any insights that you can provide from these?
Yeah, as you said, basically work-life balance has improved a lot. It actually, more than work-life balance, now there is a lot of flexibility in comparison to some of the other fields where you have to be, let's say, in a hospital between 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, who knows, right? Depending on the cases and operations you're dealing. Software engineering has improved a lot. You just need to attend the meetings, and you can be working any time of the day, at night or day. What your manager is going to care is whether you are, hitting the milestones, you are producing the results, you are writing code, you are doing tasks and activities. So in that sense, I think there has been a paradigm shift in the last 5 years. And even big companies, I remember working at Apple, and like 4 years back, and essentially when I had joined, the culture had changed a lot, and it was not required for me to kind of report if I was stepping out for, let's say, half an hour from the company to pick up my kid or something. It just depends on, it also depends on the teams, I would say, but in general, the flexibility, you get a lot of flexibility as a software engineer, especially if you are someone who has established yourself in the team. Let's say after say a year, you'll start getting a lot of flexibility. So as you said, yes, in the early stage, you do need to focus and work, but that's for any field, right? Like if you're a doctor, you're going to be doing residency for a couple of years, and you'll have to basically work day and night in hospitals and attend to operations and surgeries and all that. So, but software, you if you put 8 to 10 hours, you should be good generally. But it also depends on your own perspective. Like if you want to learn more, if you want to look into more things, right? Obviously, you are going to put a few more extra hours in the initial stages because you are learning something. But once you have learned those technologies, things will get in control, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying, I think it's the work-life balance is a new phrase in the industry. It didn't exist when Mohammad, you probably joined, or when I joined software engineering or any field.
Definitely, right? And I was just, as Zahid was talking, I was kind of recalling I think my first couple of days at my first job that I joined, right? So I remember my boss kind of came in and gave me like about three manuals for the software that we used to work on, right? This is a large piece of software that was developed over, I don't know, 10 years or so. So it had 3 manuals that were 500 pages each, right? And I think then he gave that to me. He said, hey, kind of just read it, take a look at it, play around with it, right? Like here's the system. And the first day he checked in on me, right? Then he came by like two days later, and he's like, hey, how are things going? I'm like, I'm really bored. He's like, what do you mean you're really bored? I'm like, well, I'm done with all these manuals. So I just basically stayed up and just read all those manuals and practiced as much as I could, because I was very excited, right? In terms of trying to learn. So one thing is like, once you get your like bearing and, in terms of things kind of getting done, then how things work at a company, at any company, right? There is, as a fresh grad, as you kind of go in, right? Once you get, hang of things, how things work at a company, there is more flexibility in terms of when things get done. You kind of responsible, and you show your own responsibility of getting things done, then it becomes a little bit easier as you go forward. All right, let's go to the next one. We've touched a little bit on this, right? Pretty much every domain or every industry that you can think of has software, a requirement for software engineers. So, and that's kind of reflected at least for cities across, right? These are major hubs, right? There's a lot of trend for people. You'd see in the last 2 years, especially during COVID times, working from home. You will see some of the some of the smaller ones that I don't list out here in terms of like Wisconsin, Medicine, Wisconsin, right? Or what do you call? There are a couple of other ones in Iowa, right? Smaller cities that you would not really think about as being, major software centers. But what this kind of tells you is like, there pretty much all these areas that we look at, these are major hubs for different industries. And, there is a demand for software engineers in almost all regions. Some of this is kind of also related, like I took this list from one of the articles on web. So some of this is also listed, like the other factors that, livability index and other things that kind of account for why these are listed in the way they are listed, right? Obviously, Silicon Valley is really expensive, right? But then you can kind of go towards Dallas and Atlanta and others in Austin, right? You will see like, where large software industries are there, or domains where you can have software industry and companies that are requiring a lot of software work that's being done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
kind of move. Sorry, go ahead.
This is an interesting slide. So I think the one you mentioned about domain and industry. So I just want to add a few quick things. So you should go. I encourage you guys, everyone to Google after the call. There's one nice article written by Mark Andreessen, who is used to be one of the software engineers and now is one of the well-known venture capitalist. The article title is "Why Software is Eating the World." So I'll repeat: Why software is eating the world. So just read it at your own leisure. It will give you insight into how software is encompassing various industries, whether it be your taxi cab, which is like Uber, right, or electric cars, right, and whatnot. So it's a very fascinating article and still relevant, although it was written a bunch of years back. So as Mohammad said, these industries and cities where the software innovation is taking is ever expanding, and it is across the US and even across the globe. But I would just say that I had the opportunity to work engage with some startups in Austin and also one in Boston, and obviously have worked a lot in the Bay Area. So still Bay Area is definitely the leading geographical region in terms of new trends, whether it be AI or cloud and stuff like that. Apart from Seattle, obviously, where we have Amazon and Microsoft, the two giants. Yeah, that's what I wanted to
Sure. So there was a question on chat, why cities matter to becoming a software engineer, right? I think it's certainly true, right? Like I think what Zahid, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I can answer that if you like. So cities don't necessarily matter, but there are some innovation hubs. Like for example, if you are looking for AI, then you have Google and Facebook and a lot of other startups in the Bay Area, and that's where you want to be. But if you are looking for, let's say, software that runs in medical devices or medical equipment, right? Although we have some companies here, let's say hypothetically, there may be another city, let's say Boston or something, where there are a few major players and maybe a lot of other startups, right, that do that. It's like now we have even Tesla here, but think if Tesla was not here, then you would be heading towards Detroit, Michigan, right? Because that's where the major car industry is. And if you wanted to do software engineering for electric cars and automobiles in general, that's where you would be headed. So I would say, yeah, the city, or if you wanted to work in oil and gas and something like that, you would probably go to Texas or things like that. Cities are not important. It's where the opportunities are for the areas of your interest, basically, I would say.
I mean, hopefully that addresses your question. If other people have questions, you can obviously either raise your hand, I can unmute you, or just ask the question on chat. Let's go to, all right. So just quickly, maybe we'll touch, I think we're kind of.
Mohammad, just one more quick, if you go back to the previous slide. So yeah, a good example here is New York, right? So New York has nowadays there are all kinds of software companies coming out in New York, but traditionally financial software companies, and I know Mohammad, you have experience with financial systems, you can vouch for that. Basically, all the key innovations because of Wall Street and lots of other financial institutions being there in New York, that's where the large trading systems are being built.
Yeah, exactly, right. I just kind of maybe quickly touch on that, right? We, the company that I work for currently is Bay Area based, right? But pretty much me including on the engineering side, right? Because of all of our customers or the people that we were working with were in New York, we were ending up flying into New York like almost on a monthly basis, or a couple of times a month, right? So that kind of tells you that if you were based in New York, it would have, and we thought about this, right? If you were based in New York, life would have been a lot more simpler. We could meet our customers, we could understand their problems and kind of deliver software much more easier to them if you were in New York. All right, and let's move to the next one. I know we're kind of running up on time. So that throughout the day, right, there are other sessions that will maybe delve deeper into each one of these topics. But some of the trends that you'll see, right? So when you're a software developer, right, like they could be focused on mobile development, full stack. Obviously, we talk a lot about, you hear a lot about AI and machine learning, a lot about in news cycle right now, right? There's a lot of chatter about AI and machine learning, and maybe in the next 4 years there might be something else that might be going on. There is definitely a sea change in how software is developed or implemented or developed because of cloud computing, right? But there are some of these topics that have kind of at different levels of maturity, I would say, in terms of adoption, right? Like I work on a company that is more blockchain based. While, frankly speaking, a lot of the customers that we talk to are kind of exploring kind of getting blockchain in their system, right? So we get to put software in their systems, which is just kind of their thinking about just doing. So different levels of maturity, right? And then once you have things implemented, then, still industry needs people to kind of help develop it further, maintain it, kind of customize it, things like that. I won't go through each one of these topics, but if you have any questions on anyone, we can kind of maybe dig deeper. Zahid, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, this all may be a little bit too much, but the short, gist is like the opportunity to explore different areas of interest is wide in software development and across different domains and technologies. And so it's not like you'll be stuck with something especially in the early years when you are trying to figure out, whether I like user interfaces or backend, or whether I want to be in security or, mobile development and whatnot. Basically, you have a lot of, or I want to be a data scientist, right? Or AI. You have the opportunity to shape your career for the long haul. You have in the first, few years or even later, right? So I'm sure, like Mohammad, you had entered blockchain only recently, not like 10 years back, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So basically, that's the exciting part. You are not stuck like in some other fields. If you are a certain specialist, I don't want to name a certain field, but let's say you are a certain thing, then you are only doing that thing. And yes, you are learning a lot of new things in that, but you cannot switch the whole context. Like you cannot be a specialist of, let's say, like a dentist specialist or something and say, hey, no, I want to be now internal medicine suddenly. You cannot do that. But in software, you have that scope to, shift gears. Yeah.
And different things do require, slightly different set of skills, right? While you can switch, you will, like we talked about, you can pick up some of this knowledge domains. If you are well versed in one of these areas, then you can kind of probably pick up skills required to make a switch in other areas and kind of easily make a switch, right? Like I can certainly tell, like throughout my career, I've kind of jumped around on a bunch of these things, right? I've worked on data engineering. I didn't even list the backend stuff. Like I worked a lot on backend. I've worked a lot on cloud computing, right? A little bit even on artificial intelligence, right? But certainly some of these require maybe different types of educational background, like definitely artificial intelligence, machine learning would require maybe higher level of education, typically a PhD generally right now, right? But while it's not a necessary thing, but it's definitely a lot of companies are looking for that kind of, because there is a lot of theoretical stuff required there, right? But you can make a lot of switches because you know the basics of the software industry. Let's talk a little bit about, I think this is probably, the last slide, the second last slide. Very casual, you will see, like, I think software industry generally, like I've worked on both East Coast and West Coast, and there's certainly a big difference in terms of the work environment, right, and culture. But generally it's pretty casual, as long, like I think what Zahid touched on, as long as you're getting your work done, most people don't really care, but you do get like a lot of challenging work there, right? Silicon Valley has substantial perks in this for offered by companies. I don't think it is not a norm outside of Silicon Valley, right? Even for companies that are Silicon Valley based, when they go out of Silicon Valley and they have other offices, the same perks are not usually given outside of Silicon Valley. So you just want to be kind of cognizant of that, especially for folks that are attending these sessions from Silicon Valley. Just be cognizant. Like when I worked in Michigan, so I went to Michigan, didn't have any of the perks that the companies here had. Actually, coming back also was a very pretty eye-opening, because I'd gotten used to kind of a regular corporate culture which didn't have that many perks. Kind of coming back to Silicon Valley and getting all those perks was really nice for me. Like food being catered, things like that, right? Just it was there, and just being casual, right? Like when I was on East Coast, I would dress up in like the shirt I'm kind of wearing, maybe even a tie, a jacket, right, to even show up to work. But while I'm here, like on West Coast, right, I barely wear like a collared shirt, right? I'm mostly in my jeans and t-shirt, and that's what generally everybody else is. Expect the usual amount of politics. I think that kind of goes with, depending upon the size of company, you will see that kind of happen. Zahid, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that applies in any field, but mostly like in software management. Like if you want to become a manager, and that's where you would not be coding, right? You would be mostly like you'll be like a director or whatever be the title, but basically you're a manager essentially, and you have to manage budgets, and you have to, you want to get more money or more headcount. So that's where you headcount, as in like more number of people or resource team members, right? So that's where the politics kicks in, and politics is essentially varies. The definition of politics varies, right, depending on who you talk to. But I wouldn't worry too much as a new person and trying to enter this field. I think the most important thing is, you want to see that this is something that excites you, it is interesting to you, and the best way to do that is to explore it a little bit. Yeah, at this stage.
All right, I think this brings us to our end of the formal presentation. Just want to check how we're doing on time, and if there are any questions, feel free to kind of all right, Hassan, I will unmute you. Can I unmute you? Azhar, I think you will have to unmute him.
Folks can unmute themselves. It shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. What programming languages do you prefer?
I think for someone to like, and what grade, Hassan, are you in?
Oh, I'm going to 8th grade.
Yeah, my personal preference right now in terms of languages is definitely Python. Like I definitely have asked my kids to kind of learn. They fall in between. When they were around 8th grade, I did ask them to kind of take a look at Python. I personally like at least as a starting point, but that's just my personal preference. I think it kind of opens your door to a lot of things, and there are a lot of folks that have done the programming. So I'll kind of also open it up to other people. Zahid, any, or Azhar, anything?
Yeah, you can do Python. Definitely. The only thing with Python is like just make sure that you are taking some assistance from someone initially, because setting up Python can get convoluted in comparison. So just take some assistance or join a coding camp or something. Don't try to, I would say, just don't try to log into some online tutorial or something. Maybe go through a coding camp if this is the first time you are trying to do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? It also, again, right, also depends upon your interest, right? Like my son is a lot into gaming, right? And he kind of tried to channel, especially last year, his thing about just playing games, and not just playing games, but about thinking about how to write game. So he took a class, and he was super excited to kind of implement some of the graphics and things like that, right? Kind of working out interactions. And it was in a language which I would not expect, someone like my son was in fourth grade at that time. I wouldn't expect a fourth grader to pick up Lua, but he was picking up Lua because that's what the program the software that game that he wanted to develop in the camp was teaching. So, but he was excited to kind of learn about it, and kind of, so it also depends upon your motivation and what you're trying to do. But generally, I'm big in favor of Python, especially for software programs, because it opens your doors to a lot of things, right? At least that's what I feel. All right. Any other questions?
I just had a couple of real quick comments on the coding classes. So Zahid Bhai's son I don't know if Dishan is still doing it, but if he is, he was offering free coding lessons for kids. So that I would highly recommend you reach out to Zahid Bhai if that's okay.
Yeah, I've done his class. I've done that before.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's another one this summer that another one of our kids is doing. I'm gonna put it in the chat shortly. Just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, and this is a couple of years back now. Definitely pre-COVID, we did a class which I think Zahid's son also attended. A couple of other kids also attended at that time. I think who are seniors or might have even graduated, which was building projects with Raspberry Pi, right? And if people are interested, we can kind of, I think there was a weather station they built and the LED cube. So it was a mixture of both hardware and software, and that can be interesting. It kind of exposes you to two different things. Sure. I know
the one thing I would like to add is which kind of I kind of refer to it. So in coding or software, just make sure you don't get demotivated. Like if you are setting up Python, right, setting up some software, it may not work, and because there is some configuration missing or something, just take a break or think about